My wife's sister's wedding. I was stopped by a security guard and denied entry. Your name is not on the list, he said coldly. I saw my wife and her mother watching and laughing from a distance, but I said nothing and left. The next day they came to me in tears, begging for help for a reason I never could have expected. It was a beautiful day, one of those crisp mornings that promises a perfect celebration. I had polished my shoes, donned my best suit, and even added a small boutonniere Karen insisted matched her sister Lisa's wedding theme. This was a big day for her family. And while I wasn't particularly close to Lisa, I was there to support Karen. When I arrived at the grand venue, a sprawling estate buzzing with guests dressed to impress, my excitement was tempered by a creeping unease. I was proud to stand beside Karen, even if her family treated me like an outsider more often than not. Today, I told myself, was about celebrating love. I approached the entrance confidently, nodding to the security guard at the door as I handed over my invitation. He glanced at it, then at me and frowned. Your name isn't on the list, he said flatly. I blinked. That can't be right. I'm Thomas Reed. I'm Karen's husband. The guard's face didn't change. I'm sorry, sir. I can't let you in. You'll need to step aside. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Karen had accidentally forgotten to confirm my attendance. Maybe it was some clerical error. But then I saw her standing a few feet away with her mother, Vivian. They weren't rushing to explain the misunderstanding or vouch for me. Instead, they were laughing. The sight hit me harder than I expected. Karen, the woman I had promised to love and support, stood with a hand over her mouth trying to stifle a giggle. Vivian didn't bother to hide her amusement, her head thrown back in a loud laugh. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. My throat tightened as I glanced at the other guests milling around, some watching the scene unfold. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd and a few phones were raised. Capturing this humiliating moment for posterity, I could feel my pulse in my ears. A dull roar drowning out the world around me. I wanted to shout, to demand an explanation, but I knew that would only give Karen and Vivian exactly what they wanted. More humiliation for me, their convenient scapegoat. So, I did the only thing I could. I straightened my shoulders, nodded to the security guard and walked away. The drive home was a blur. My thoughts raced, replaying the moment over and over. How had it come to this? Karen and I weren't perfect, but I thought we were partners. Yet this felt like something deeper, a deliberate attempt to degrade me, to show me that in her world I was expendable. I parked the car and sat in silence, staring at the dashboard. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked foreign, stoic on the outside, but beneath that calm facade, a storm was brewing. I had been ignored before, brushed aside at family gatherings and treated like an accessory at social events. But this was different. This was public, calculated and cruel. Later that evening Karen came home, the faint scent of champagne and roses clinging to her. She didn't seem surprised to see me sitting on the couch. You didn't stay for the ceremony? She asked, feigning innocence. I looked at her, searching for any sign of remorse, but all I saw was indifference. You knew I wasn't on the list, I said evenly. She shrugged, her tone dismissive. Mom thought it would be best to keep things simple. Lisa wanted an exclusive guest list. You understand, right? I didn't respond. What was there to say? That night, as Karen slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The laughter, the whispers, the humiliation, it all replayed in my mind like a cruel loop. Something had shifted. This wasn't just about the wedding, it was about respect. Respect I realized Karen and her family had never truly given me. I promised myself that I wouldn't forget this moment. It wasn't just a rejection from a wedding, it was a rejection of me as a person, as a partner. And while I didn't know it yet, this was the beginning of the end. The days after Lisa's wedding were a haze of frustration and reflection. The humiliation I endured at the hands of Karen and her mother Vivian replayed in my mind constantly. But instead of an apology, Karen carried on as though nothing had happened. In fact, it seemed like the wedding had only added fuel to her social media frenzy. My wife was obsessed with curating an image of perfection, a glamorous, enviable lifestyle that was far removed from reality. Karen's days were consumed with uploading perfectly staged photos, showcasing high-end restaurants, designer clothes and luxury events. Meanwhile, I was working long hours as a project manager, building a stable, honest career. I didn't mind that Karen came from a wealthier background, or that her family enjoyed luxuries I never could. What stung was her complete disregard for the sacrifices I made to support her lifestyle. I'd often come home from work to find her lounging in the living room, scrolling through her phone, her laptop open with online shopping tabs. Packages arrived daily, each one containing something new and expensive. Shoes, handbags, jewelry. I'd ask, "How was your day?" She'd wave me off, barely looking up. Fine. Lisa and I went shopping. Every conversation felt like a transaction, devoid of any real connection. One night, while I was reviewing project reports in my home office, I overheard Karen talking to her mother on the phone. "Thomas just doesn't get it," she said, her voice filled with irritation. "He thinks budgeting means saying no to a new pair of shoes. It's embarrassing." Vivian's response was muffled. But I caught the words "beneath us" and "just a phase." A phase? I clenched my fists, the sting of their words cutting deep. Was that how they saw me? As some temporary inconvenience, someone to tolerate until they could move on to something better? Their attitude toward me was reflected in the lavish events they attended. From charity galas to exclusive brunches, Karen and Vivian were regular fixtures in the city's elite social scene. I was rarely invited, and when I was, it was clear they preferred me to stay quiet and blend into the background. The few times I tried to engage, Vivian would cut me off with a patronizing comment, or Karen would steer the conversation back to herself. It was as though my accomplishments, my opinions, my very presence were an afterthought. I began noticing the stark contrast between our lives more acutely. Karen's Instagram feed was a highlight reel of extravagance. Her posing in designer gowns, sipping champagne with Lisa, and flashing diamond earrings that I hadn't bought her. Meanwhile, my own life was practical, grounded. I paid bills, planned for our future, and handled the day-to-day responsibilities that kept everything running smoothly. But none of that mattered to Karen. What mattered was appearances. One evening after Karen had gone to bed, I scrolled through her social media out of curiosity. It was all there, the perfect facade. Caption after caption painted a picture of a flawless, glamorous life. Grateful for this amazing family and all the blessings in life. My face wasn't in a single photo, not one mention of me or my role in making those blessings possible. Instead it was Lisa, Vivian, and Karen, smiling at fancy restaurants or lounging on pristine beaches, the captions dripping with self-satisfaction. The breaking point came when I stumbled across a video from Lisa's wedding. It had been uploaded by one of Karen's friends. The video showed me standing at the entrance of the venue, arguing with the security guard. The camera zoomed in on my confused expression as Karen and Vivian laughed in the background. The caption read, "When you don't belong at the VIP table, face with tears of joy, awkward moments." My blood boiled. This wasn't just neglect or indifference, this was intentional, public humiliation. I closed my laptop and sat in silence, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Karen and I had once dreamed of building a life together, but now it felt like I was a mere footnote in her pursuit of social validation. The contrast between our worlds was glaring, and for the first time, I realized just how far apart we had grown. I wasn't angry about her wealth or her family's affluence. I was angry that I had been reduced to a joke upon in her quest for appearances. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a thought occurred to me. How long could I keep living like this? Tension had a way of creeping into my marriage with Karen, slowly but relentlessly, until it became the defining feature of our lives. The more time passed, the more I noticed the distance between us. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual. Karen's obsession with maintaining her social status became all-consuming. Her days revolved around glamorous outings, orchestrated photo shoots, and endless conversations with her mother Vivian about the latest trends and upcoming events. And then, there was me, the husband who didn't quite fit into her picture-perfect world. It wasn't always like this. I remembered a time when Karen and I laughed together, dreamed together, and talked about building a life that was ours. But those days felt like a distant memory. Now I found myself watching from the sidelines as she played a starring role in a life I didn't recognize. The tension came to a head one evening when Karen announced casually and without preamble that Lisa's wedding would be the event of the year. "It's going to be incredible," she said, scrolling through her phone as she reclined on the couch. "Lisa's pulled out all the stops, celebrity chef, live orchestra, the works." I nodded, trying to engage. "Sounds impressive. Are we doing anything to help with the preparations?" Karen barely looked up. "Oh, Lisa's got it covered. Besides, you wouldn't really be involved in the planning. It's more of a family thing." I frowned. I thought I was family. Karen waved her hand dismissively. "You know what I mean?" Her words stung more than I cared to admit. That was the thing about Karen. She didn't always need to say something outright to make her feelings clear. To her, I wasn't really part of her family. I was a convenient accessory, someone to pay the bills and provide stability while she pursued her curated version of perfection. As the wedding day approached, the cracks in our relationship became impossible to ignore. Karen spent hours on the phone with Vivian and Lisa, discussing every detail of the event, the guest list, the decorations, the menu. It was all carefully orchestrated to impress. I was rarely included in these conversations. When I tried to join in, Karen would brush me off with a quick, "Don't worry about it," or "This isn't really your thing." It wasn't just the wedding that caused tension. Karen's social media presence had become a point of contention as well. One evening I glanced at her phone as she posted yet another picture of herself in a designer dress. The caption read, "Grateful for this fabulous life and the amazing people who make it possible." Amazing people? I couldn't help but wonder if I even made the list. The distance between us grew wider with each passing day. Conversations became strained, our shared laughter a distant memory. I felt like I was living with a stranger, someone more concerned with likes and comments than the man she had married. The final straw came during a family dinner a week before the wedding. Vivian was holding court as usual, regaling everyone with tales of Lisa's extravagant plans. "This wedding is going to be talked about for years," she said with a self-satisfied smile. "It's a real family affair." I raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't seem like I've been involved much in this family affair." The table went silent for a moment before Vivian laughed. "Oh, Thomas, don't take it personally. This is Lisa's day. You're more of a behind-the-scenes kind of guy." Behind the scenes. Karen chuckled along with her mother, and I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't just what they said. It was the way they said it, as though I didn't belong. That night Karen and I argued for the first time in months. "Why do you let them treat me like this?" I demanded, my voice shaking with frustration. "Like what?" Karen shot back. "They don't mean anything by it. You're just overreacting." "Overreacting?" I said, incredulous. "Karen, I'm your husband. I should feel like I'm part of your life, not some outsider." She sighed, exasperated. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Can't you just let it go?" "Let it go." I didn't say anything else that night. What was the point? Karen had made it clear where her priorities lay and I wasn't one of them. The tension between us was no longer something I could ignore. It had become the defining feature of our marriage, a constant unspoken presence that colored every interaction, and as Lisa's wedding drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to reach a breaking point. The day of Lisa's wedding had finally arrived. It was all anyone in Karen's family could talk about for weeks. The high-profile guest list, the glamorous venue, the endless luxuries that only someone with Vivian's influence could orchestrate. For Karen, this was more than a family celebration. It was a chance to flaunt her status, to step into the spotlight and bask in the admiration of the elite. For me, it was something entirely different. I dressed carefully that morning, pulling on the tailored suit Karen had picked out for me months earlier. The memory stung now, as I realized it was more about how I'd look in photos than any actual consideration for me. Karen was already gone by the time I finished getting ready. She left early to help Lisa with last-minute preparations, though help likely meant sipping champagne and posing for pre-ceremony pictures. I followed behind in my car, my nerves building with each mile. After the tension of the past few weeks, I hoped that being present at the wedding might help bridge the growing gap between Karen and me. When I arrived at the venue, it was every bit as opulent as expected. A sprawling estate with manicured gardens, fountains glistening in the sunlight, and valets darting between luxury cars. Guests in designer dresses and tailored suits milled about, their laughter and chatter filling the air. I approached the entrance where a stern-looking security guard stood with a clipboard. "Name?" he asked curtly. "Thomas Reed," I replied, offering a polite smile. The guard scanned his list, his brow furrowing. "You're not on here." For a moment, I thought he must have made a mistake. "That can't be right," I said. "I'm Karen's husband. I was invited." The guard's expression didn't change. "Your name isn't on the list. I can't let you in." I glanced around, searching for Karen or anyone who might vouch for me. That's when I saw them. Karen and Vivian standing a few yards away watching the exchange with thinly veiled amusement. Karen turned to her mother and said something, and they both laughed. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. I tried to reason with the guard one last time. "Please, can you check again? This has to be an error." But his tone remained firm. "I'm sorry, sir, you need to step aside." As I moved away from the entrance, the reality of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. Karen and Vivian had orchestrated this humiliation, reducing me to a spectacle for their amusement. To make matters worse, I noticed several guests looking in my direction, their whispers and sidelong glances making my humiliation complete. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a notification from social media, curious and dreading it at the same time. I opened the app to find a live stream. The video was clear, me standing awkwardly at the entrance, the guard denying me entry and Karen in the background laughing. The caption read, "When you don't make the VIP list. Face with tears of joy #awkward husband moments." My heart raced as I stared at the screen, my face heating with anger and shame. They hadn't just humiliated me in front of their friends and family, they had broadcasted it to the world. I turned and walked back to my car, each step heavier than the last. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I drove away, my mind swirling with a mix of anger, sadness and disbelief. How had it come to this? How had I gone from being Karen's partner, her confidant, to the butt of her jokes? That evening Karen came home late, still glowing from the success of the event. "Why did you leave?" she asked casually, as though nothing had happened. "You know why?" I replied, my voice colder than I intended. She shrugged, completely unfazed. "It's just a bit of fun, Thomas. Don't take everything so seriously." I stared at her, searching for some trace of guilt or remorse, but there was none. She didn't care. Not about the humiliation, not about my feelings, not about us. That night I lay awake, replaying the day's events in my mind. The laughter, the whispers, the live stream. It all felt like a cruel joke at my expense. But more than that, it felt like a turning point. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about respect, or rather, the lack of it. Karen and her family had shown me exactly how they saw me, and it was a truth I couldn't ignore. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: something had to change. The morning after the wedding humiliation, I woke up to the relentless buzzing of my phone. At first I thought it might be work, but as I unlocked the screen my heart sank. Social media notifications flooded in. Tags, comments and messages, all stemming from that live stream. Karen's fun at my expense had gone viral. Strangers I'd never met weighed in on my life, turning my humiliation into their entertainment. I scrolled through the comments, each one more cutting than the last. "Imagine being so pathetic your own wife doesn't want you at the wedding. This guy seriously thought he was very important person material?" "Face with tears of joy. Karen deserves better." My chest tightened as I read them, the words cutting deeper than I expected. I wasn't just embarrassed anymore. I was furious. Karen had crossed a line, and now I was left to face the fallout. When Karen came downstairs, she was her usual self, calm, composed, and completely unaware of the storm she'd unleashed. "Morning," she said breezily, scrolling through her phone as she sipped her coffee. "Morning," I replied. My voice clipped. She didn't notice my tone, too absorbed in her social media feed. That was until she came across the comments. "Oh," she muttered, her expression shifting ever so slightly. "People can be so mean online." I stared at her, incredulous. "Mean? Karen, they're mocking me because of what you and your mother did yesterday." She looked up, feigning innocence. What are you talking about? The live stream, the comments, the whole scene you orchestrated at the wedding, I said, my voice rising. Do you even realize how humiliating that was for me? Karen rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Thomas. It was a joke. People are just overreacting. A joke? I repeated, my anger boiling over. You publicly humiliated your husband. How is that a joke? Karen sighed, clearly annoyed. You're being dramatic. If you can't handle a little harmless fun, that's on you. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep my composure. It was clear Karen didn't see or didn't care about the damage she had done. Harmless fun, I said, my voice steady but cold. You've turned me into a joke, Karen, and now I'm the one who has to deal with the fallout. She didn't respond, instead turning back to her phone. The backlash wasn't limited to strangers online. At work, my colleagues tiptoed around me, their awkward smiles and hushed whispers confirming they'd seen the video. During a meeting, one of them made a passing comment trying to lighten the mood. Hey Thomas, maybe you should try getting on the guest list next time. The room erupted in laughter, but I sat there stone-faced. It wasn't just the jokes, it was the pity in their eyes. Everyone saw me as the man whose wife didn't respect him, and it hurt more than I cared to admit. At home, things weren't any better. Karen continued to post her curated version of life online, ignoring the growing tension between us. She acted as though nothing had happened, brushing off any attempt I made to address the situation. But the worst part was the silence from her family. Vivian, who had been so vocal in orchestrating the wedding, had nothing to say about the fallout. It was as though they had washed their hands of me entirely. As the days passed, only intensified. Karen's followers latched onto the narrative she had created, painting me as the unworthy husband who didn't belong in her glamorous world. I started receiving private messages, some taunting, others offering unsolicited advice. Maybe you should step up your game if you want to keep a woman like Karen. She deserves someone who can match her lifestyle. Each message was a reminder of how far things had spiraled out of control. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room scrolling through the relentless barrage of comments, I realized something had to change. Karen's disregard for my feelings wasn't just a problem, it was the problem. For years I had put up with her family's condescension and her obsession with appearances, convincing myself it would get better. But this wasn't something I could fix. Karen didn't respect me, and without respect there